So to go ahead and get started, we have a really great session planned for you all today, just all about grad school. And I'm pleased to be introducing some of the mentors we have from another degree and the speakers that we have. Kelly, would you like to share what another degree is?
Absolutely. So as it says here, another degree connects aspiring graduate and professional students with expert mentors, several of them here today, who provide personalized guidance, application strategies, and support to help them successfully navigate advanced degree pathways. So really the full spectrum of postgraduate education preparation, from early exploration all the way through to writing those application statements, thinking about what kind of schools to go into, and then even thinking about and navigating doing your research projects and thesis, and even on to career advising. So many academics are, and even outside of academia, are thinking about, what are the range of things I can do with my degree. So if you go to our website, anotherdegree.com, you'll see a lot of our offerings there. But I also want to emphasize that we're building out opportunities and connections with institutions. So it's possible that in the future, if you're affiliated with an alumni organization or currently in a college or university, you may see some of our services and programs being offered. And if you're here joining from an institution, please do feel free to reach out to me and learn more about, what we can offer in terms of curriculum to support students thinking about going to graduate programs, and also for getting research and professional experiences to kind of try out and see what works best for you. Thank you, Jolene. So you want to tell me a little bit about the Postgrad Playbook?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi everyone. You saw me talking a little bit earlier, but I'm Jolene Dolnay and I'm the founder of the Postgrad Playbook. Basically, the Postgrad Playbook is the only platform helping postgrads pivot into aligned careers, not just impressive ones. So think about it like this. When you entered college, you had orientation, but when you leave, there isn't much infrastructure around that. So we're a media company and a community helping postgrads navigate those challenges personally, professionally, financially, socially. And we partner with several companies and today with another degree to provide these resources for you all to answer the hard questions around grad school and everything that goes into that, right? The Postgrad Playbook has been featured in Essence. We partner with LinkedIn News often, Ad Age, Business Insider, New York Times, and Afrotech. So growing across the nation and helping you for all things postgrad life. And like I said, today for grad school. So we're excited to be talking about that.
Yeah, that's so great. So everyone here, I really encourage you to download the helpful guides from the Postgrad Playbook. And we'll share a link after the meeting that you can connect to them if you haven't already. And I'm so thrilled to have so many of you here. And before we introduce our panelists, I want to give you a quick rundown of what to expect for our time together. So outlined here are some of the main questions that Jolene is going to address to our panelists today. I know many of you submitted some excellent questions in advance, and we've compiled them into these themes that we're going to cover. They're all really heavy-hitting topics that I know you have a lot on your minds. So I want to make sure that we get to those. And also, as we have panelists representing very different degree pathways, the answers might be very different depending on what type of degree that you are interested in pursuing. And then in the last 20 to 30 minutes, I will address the panel with questions that come up live and during the session, and some that were submitted in advance that are a little bit more specific to the degrees that our panelists hold. With that, I want to thank you all for your attention, and let's introduce our panelists.
All right, Marina, you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. My name is Marina Lanskevich. I am a psychiatry resident at Case Western / University Hospitals. I did my medical degree at University of Illinois at Chicago. And then I did a research fellowship as well at Northwestern. And fun fact about me is that I initially wanted to do surgery. So I actually did a year of surgery at University of Kentucky in Lexington.
Great. Ted?
Hi, I'm Ted Bernstein. Thank you for inviting me. Um, my background is focused on healthcare, but from a number of different perspectives. And the reason for that is that as an undergraduate at Johns Hopkins, I was in a life sciences degree and um, then, really viewed the healthcare environment and, made the observation that we have a lot of good treatments, we have a lot of good therapies, we have a lot of good clinicians, but getting that care to patients has not always been efficient, cost effective, et cetera. And so that's the direction I went in. After undergraduate, earned a Master of Public Health at Yale, and then worked at Massachusetts General Hospital for a couple of years and returned to school and earned a law degree and an MBA, and have been involved in supporting healthcare organizations and some life science organizations. And I've also, in terms of financings, transactions, and the like. And more recently, I have been involved with several companies in interim and fractional roles in executive positions.
Great. Thanks, Ted. And Charisse?
Hello, everyone. So glad to be here. My name is Charisse Bino, originally from New York City. Currently live in New Jersey. I started my undergraduate career at Temple University in Philadelphia, where I majored in African American Studies and English literature. At my core, I'm an educator and a systems level leader. And so I've started my career teaching. As a teacher, I've taught so many grades, early childhood, special education, middle school, as well as high school. I've also served as an assistant principal, a school principal. I've also worked as a school district leader in the Virgin Islands. I was the director of special education in the British Virgin Islands. And I've worked in New Orleans as well. So I've worked nationally, internationally, and I've worked as a teacher, as I mentioned, and a school leader. And so I'm also, a neurodivergent learner. I'm a person that I'm not ashamed of saying that. So I'm a person that learns very differently, as many of us do. And so my passion and my work has been in supporting vulnerable populations of students like myself. And so thank you so much for having me.
Great. And lastly, Amy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy. I actually just defended my thesis in June, so I'm fresh out of grad school. I actually did my undergrad in UC San Diego, and I kind of started my training as an undergrad wanting to go into medical school. But when I started getting experience in research, I kind of really enjoyed it. And I was like, this is like really complementary to the lifestyle I want to do. So I continued with research. I kind of took like the path of least resistance for me at that time. So I started my PhD in neuroscience at UCLA, just finished it after 5 years. And now I'm kind of shifting gears to do a lot of mentorship, programming, and also just kind of enjoying and basking in this really big accomplishment. So, yeah, my specialty in neuroscience is studying sensory processing in autism, and I also have ADHD. So I'm very passionate about helping others with neurodivergent learning styles to kind of figure out where you fit in and also embrace and kind of turn it into your superpower in academia. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. Like, I'm so inspired by this lineup and everything that you're going to be sharing today. And before we get into it, also, I would love to know a little bit more about outside of your professional titles, what are your greatest achievements that you're proud of, and what motivates you?
If we're going in the same order, then I guess I'll start. So I am an immigrant. I'm from Belarus. It's above Ukraine. I guess my greatest achievement is that I came to the US at the age of 16 and kind of figured it out here on my own, which sort of is related to the professional stuff still. Um, but I also speak 5 languages, which I also kind of can consider my greatest achievement. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the accomplishments you're proud of.
Yeah, so then I'm done.
And what motivates you? Yeah.
Oh, what motivates? So I'm training to do child psychiatry. So I think like, the theme of a lot of our participants here, panelists here, are, like protecting the more vulnerable population. So that's exactly the theme that I'm gearing towards as well.
Amazing.
With respect to what I'm most proud of, at least thus far, I would have to say I think it's assisting quite a few founders and early stage companies as a mentor or advisor or an investment banker and helping them get financing or consummate other transactions that were necessary to bring their service or their product to market. And as I alluded to before, the motivation there was really and continues to be focused on healthcare and life sciences. I've worked with a company to bring virtual behavioral health services to emergency departments. I've worked with a hydrogel company in regenerative medicine. I've worked with a bioprinting company and many others. And being able to assist these really enthusiastic entrepreneurs who have great ideas, great drive, great ambition, and really useful services and products is very fulfilling. And I really enjoy it very much. Helping them solve problems is really what motivates me.
Nice. Charisse? Yeah.
Yes, I would say, again, at my core, I see myself as an educator. I see myself as a builder. Education has always been, for me, about creating opportunities for other people to succeed. Whether it's, I've been a classroom teacher, an assistant principal, a principal, director of education, and now I'm actually back in the classroom. I'm teaching high school AP classes, which I'm really, really excited about, and thinking more about like perhaps serving as a professor at some point. But my work has always centered on helping students and educators grow. But outside of my school role, I'm also the founder of an education consulting firm, which I'm very proud of as well. It's called Next Gen Learning Partners. It focuses on helping schools build healthier and more reflective spaces for students. So my work has expanded from impacting students and schools to thinking more about how systems can create better opportunities for students. I think that for me, I'm primarily motivated by impact. Like I love solving problems, as Ted mentioned, building systems and helping people to just reach opportunities that they may not have thought were possible. And so in terms of like my degrees, I have my master's degree in education leadership from Columbia University, Teachers College, and I have my doctorate from TC as well. And so I am proud of that, but I'm especially proud that every degree has really allowed me to serve at a higher level. And so it's helped to open new doors from, as mentioned, becoming a teacher to becoming a school leader. And so and also conducting research, so that's also been something that I'm very proud of as well.
Amazing. And Amy?
Yeah. I love this question, by the way. It kind of had me reflecting for a while when I saw it in our email chain. But to put pretty simply, I think I consider and identify myself as like a really casual mentor. I'm very inspired to like develop and also share my experiences in a relatively vetted community because I know that academia is a little bit exclusive. There are plenty of good mentors and there are just as much bad mentors. So I find a lot of joy in guiding students towards the people that would help them and away from the people that would actively probably not help them. So I think my philosophy with mentorship really is just like pulling back the curtains on a lot of institutional patterns and also helping people kind of decide where they want to bring their intellectual capital. Because I think as academics, like that's all you really have to show for is like your brain and also how you can make certain operations and research projects go further as far as you would like it to go. So I'm very motivated by like taking care of myself, my family, and also just sharing this intellectual capital that I feel like I've been pretty privileged to earn. And my biggest accomplishment was last year. I actually competed for Taekwondo Olympic style sparring, and I actually made it to state championships for my weight class.
Wow.
And that was kind of like a side quest that I had when I was procrastinating my dissertation. So yeah, won my first gold medal, and I was always winning bronze as a kid. And so when I was like really stressed about my PhD, I was like, what can I do for myself now? Let's get back to Taekwondo. And I went all the way to the state championships. So I'm really proud about that.
Wow, that's amazing. And we love a good side quest. Like I love
Dang.
learning.
Yeah, we need them. Yeah, it makes us
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, better, well-rounded, and I'm sure some of those skills in your side quests and what everyone else was doing translated into your professional lives
Yeah.
too. Yeah, but so now as we like move into it, the reason why everyone is here asking that big question, should I go to grad school? And so, Kelly, if you'd share the first screen, but my first set of questions around all of it is centered around like why grad school and like the career outcomes around that. And so when we are thinking about it, can you all tell us more about, people, tell us a little bit for the people who are on the fence if grad school is a good fit for them or not? I think one of the main questions that we did get around this is that how can we calculate the ROI of attending grad school and the best way to think of that investment? And if it's even extremely applicable in the fields that they're looking for. Anyone can jump in.
Um, well, with med school, as some of you know, it never ends. And I guess Amy mentioned the same thing. So it's really hard to calculate an ROI if you kind of approach this purely from a practical standpoint. Being a doctor, you definitely have to be on more of a delusional side about this. So, medical school is 4 years right now, and a lot of people who end up going or attempting to go into more competitive specialties afterwards do like additional things like MPH or a PhD during it or research fellowships to kind of strengthen their application. Um, and then after that, obviously, you do the residency, which is the part that I'm in right now. So you're a trained doctor, but you're like specializing in the specialty that you're interested in. So that also lasts a different number of years, depending on the specialty you're interested in, ranging from 3 years for internal medicine to 7 years for neurosurgery. And then after that, if you're interested to subspecialize, like I mentioned, I'm interested in child psychiatry, then you do a fellowship. Like, for example, my child psychiatry is a 2-year fellowship after 4 years 3 years of psychiatry for me. We can fast track from 4 years. So it is a lifelong commitment for sure. And nowadays, with a lot of administration changes, administration influence on medical education in this country, it's a little bit more difficult to per se calculate an ROI. There's a lot of changes on how we're reimbursed, how people are able to get loans for medical school. Um, the PSLF or like public service forgiveness program that allowed us to get our student loans forgiven if we committed to like working in a nonprofit organization, which a lot of hospitals are, has been on pause and is most likely about to be destroyed, which is another big problem, obviously. So from financial standpoint, it is a little bit difficult. So just keep that in mind. I want to be very realistic about this. This is a big, big, big commitment. But it is I would not be able to do anything else but this. And if I weren't a doctor, I probably would be like a contractor working something with my hands because I love doing things with my hands. Like I wouldn't go to a different grad school. I mean, so it's a lot about, helping people, working with the patients, lifelong learning, contributing to the field of medicine, contributing to the literature. So it's a lot of internal motivation and kind of feeling of self-fulfillment rather than like a real number of for ROI.
It's a really interesting question for a number of reasons because, um, and this is coming from, the finance operations guy. There are a lot of different ways to measure ROI. It's not necessarily all about, you know, cash returns, right? There's ROI can be measured in terms of a sense of fulfillment, a sense of happiness in terms of what you're doing. Perhaps these aren't really practical ways to look at it because it costs money to go to graduate school, but I think those are components that one shouldn't ignore. But if you do look at the money part of it and the financial return, um, it gets to be, it's a very complicated question because I think one thing we have to do is separate professional schools from graduate schools. If one wants to become a physician or an attorney or a dentist, it's kind of hard to do those things without going to those professional schools, right? I mean, you can't, you know, you can't go out and hang out a shingle and say, I'm gonna, start doing orthopedic surgery or something. Um, so there's that. So there's an absolute requirement in terms of the professional degrees. Now, in terms of graduate school, I think that, it really depends upon an assessment of what one wants to do with the degree. Um, as an undergraduate, it took me a long time to think through what I wanted to do. And when I really, I didn't decide at all, one night. It took a while. And even after I got out of undergraduate school, there was more and more thinking that went into it. But I think that overall, I would say, depending upon um, what you want to do, how competitive it is to get into the particular industry in which you're interested, the more you have to differentiate yourself and qualify yourself. And so, if one wants to go into academia, you have to go to graduate school, you have to get a PhD. If one wants to go, in terms of, you know, teaching, at the university level or what have you. If one wants to go into, executive roles or investment banking or, alternative asset management or something, there's probably something I think to be said for applicable graduate schools. And by applicable, I mean, if you're interested in finance and MBA, it's a pretty good way to go. There are substitutes out there, and I hope that we get into talking about that because there's some good substitutes and there are substitutes that are complete and utter wastes of money and time. And I'm talking about the certificate mills, and I hope that we get back to that subject. In my opinion, there are very few certificates that are worthwhile today, and I think a whole industry has cropped up around uh, seeming to provide folks shortcuts to get to where they want to be, and they aren't always that helpful. So, I'm sorry this is getting a little long, but I think one really has to focus on where they want to go in terms of their career trajectory. And I think that starts to answer the question about do you need that degree and is the ROI there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to basically echo a lot of the same things that Ted and Marina said. I think that, yes, first graduate school can definitely be, a credential, especially, in education. Many of the positions, especially leadership positions, just aren't available without a graduate degree. If you want to be a principal or assistant principal, a superintendent, and as Ted mentioned, if you want to go into academia, become a professor, you definitely need an advanced degree to do that. If you want to be an educational consultant, a researcher, you need an advanced degree. And so but yes, graduate school isn't, really just about like collecting credentials, it's about like how can it prepare me to think differently? I think that when, I became a teacher, like I knew how to teach, but then later on, like graduate school helped me to think differently about like pedagogy, and instructional practices. And so I think that, um, you know, it's important when you're thinking about like the return of investment, as mentioned as well. Um, yes, it's about salary. We definitely, are, attending graduate school so that we can make money. And especially like in today's economy, like things are just so expensive. But, I would also like encourage people to think about other opportunities, career opportunities, leadership opportunities, other, long-term earning potential, as Ted mentioned, personal fulfillment, that's also something that you may want to think about, professional networking as well. And so I think that for me, every graduate degree that I earned just opened a door for another career pathway, so, it allowed me to teach and, as I mentioned, become a principal, a superintendent. Although I'm back in the classroom now, which I love, I'm still able to now own my own consulting business. And so yeah.
Yeah. Amy, I saw that you had a thought about software certificates too in the chat.
Oh yeah, I share the sentiment, Ted, with certificates, but software certificates though, yeah, those still you can't replace those. You can't teach someone to talk to a computer um, without a certificate. I just wanted to give that caveat. To add my thoughts, I think for me, grad school started off as a way to naturally transition out of a research lab I was working in during my gap year. I was like the sole leader of a research project, and I did not see it going to finish with a publication anytime soon. So I was like, I think this is a good time to hand off the baton and recruit someone. So I actually had no idea because I mean, at this point, I had just decided I didn't want to go to med school, but I didn't know where to go next. So I was like, okay, what can I do with the momentum in academia that I currently had at that time? And I was like, okay, I could go into neuroscience since this is a lab that like kind of took me in and taught me how to do science. So I actually went on LinkedIn during that time and interviewed a bunch of people with job titles that I might want to be in 5 to 7 years. And
Very smart.
I
Very
asked
smart.
people with and without PhDs, do you regret it if you didn't do a PhD, or do you plan to do a PhD in your role? Like, what's your next career plan? And to jump to the next level, do you think you'll need a PhD? Or do you think you needed that PhD for the people that had PhDs? So I did a lot of stalking, like visualizing what I wanted to do in 5 to 7 years. And from my research, those interviews, a lot of the people that I talked to in the roles that I wanted had PhDs and said they were going to eventually get a PhD if they didn't. So that's how I made the decision of, you know what, like maybe this is a good thing for me because that's where I want to end up. And that kind of takes the front loaded work of doing research and getting the credentials for what I wanted to do. Because it's kind of hard to get back into a PhD after a few years, I heard, just like going to school again. So yeah, if you feel like the PhD is necessary eventually, you might as well front load it while you're like young and also like full of ideas and inspiration. So yeah, I ended up choosing programs also that would fully fund my work. So that's like mostly STEM programs. But I was particularly interested in this PhD being like a job. So I like mentally decided like this is going to be like a job. Like I'm not going to do it for free personally. And if I were to TA for this program, it would have to be extra money. And that's just a personal decision that I made. And I was able to find a program that aligned with that, the neuroscience program at UCLA and many of the programs that at well-funded universities. So that was a personal focus for how I decided to do a PhD. And honestly, also something that was taught to me was some programs after 2 years, you could master out. So if you don't like it or you find a better opportunity that comes up, you could leave the program and have been paid for a master's. So I also chose a program that had the option for in case a better opportunity came up, or I was just like not having it, I can leave with a master's. And in terms of your question about how the return of investment kind of worked out for me, I personally now am qualified for doing research at academic, government, private, or even independent capacity. I could also teach at universities. I can consult for companies. I can manage projects. I could do science communications. I can write blogs for science. I can also help with technology development since my specialty was MRI work with kids with autism. So it kind of is whatever skill you kind of foster, that's going to be the opportunities that open up for you when you graduate. And so for me, the return of investment is like intellectual capital, business strategy, because I saw running as a lab, like running a lab is kind of like running a like being a CEO of a business. So I learned a lot from my mentor about like management and how to hire good people. Also, just a lot of personal growth that I had. Like I just yesterday had an undergrad student that wanted to publish a literature review with one of my committee members. And the committee members said, no, I only co-author with students and alumni. So I guess that's a privilege that I now have, even though like I probably wouldn't want to. Like that's something that you gain in terms of a PhD and credentials is like this in to this exclusive club that you get to decide who you want to work with, but certain people will only work with you if you have this credential. So that's how I see a PhD. I could be publishing papers with other people's grant money. That's how I see it because I have no interest in running my own lab, but I like to publish papers and contribute to neuroscience. So now I'm just kind of doing research without it, without my livelihood on the line for it. So that's my two cents on how I've kind of leveraged the gamble, honestly, of a career decision that you might not know where it will take you. But I think there's plenty of people on LinkedIn that are happy to chat about their experiences that you could get like really good advice from. And also like all of us here on the panel.
Yeah. Amy, you brought up, everyone brought up so many good points. I love the reaching out to someone on LinkedIn. And you also talked about that it is a gamble, and I think that sometimes people, part of that gamble is when to make that decision, right? Do you go right after undergrad or do you take a year or two? I know that with different programs, they're looking for different things. Like, for example, if you want to go to med school versus like an MBA program, opening up to a group the group, what would you all say are the advantages or disadvantages of going to get a postgrad degree, undergrad versus taking that gap? And then also a follow-up question to that is how can a student access whether they're ready or their chances of acceptance based off of how much time they take?
I think yeah, I'm hard pressed to think of a real disadvantage of taking time between undergrad and a graduate degree. And it's for two reasons. Graduate programs, and of course, it varies depending upon your area of interest and the school that you're looking at. But by definition, graduate programs are going to be relatively more competitive. And the more that one can differentiate themselves from the other applicants, the other candidate pool, the more interesting you are to an admissions committee or admissions officer. And one, I think, very good way to do that is to take a couple of years off and do something that interests you, that is additive to the direction that you want to go, or it might dissuade you from the direction that you think you want to go. And so that really has value, and it does help differentiate the individual. And secondly, financing graduate school or professional school is a challenge. And having the opportunity, having the time earlier on in one's career or education to go out and make some money and save some money before having all of the commitments and responsibilities that ultimately and inevitably evolve with life is a good strategy, I think. Put some money away. It will help finance your education, and you're going to improve your odds of being admitted where you want to go.
I completely agree, both about the interesting, story and the finances. That being said, obviously, a lot of medical students are still straight out of undergrad. Um, but you can tell that they're figuring out as they go. So sometimes I had colleagues who went to med school because their parents kind of told them to, so they're like trying to figure out whether this is actually what they wanted to do once they're already in medical school, which is not the best, plan of action. So taking your time and figuring it out and actually having maybe even some prior work in the field. I know some people who were nurses and save some money, before coming to medical school. I have friends who were social workers before, I had friends who were engineers before, and they decided to become like orthopedic surgeons, whatnot. Um, so it not only makes you a more interesting applicant because it is, hard to get into medical school. So you like standing out in any possible way is already a good move. But also helps you as a person, as a human being, to decide what you want to do. Because very often people who cannot decide during medical school end up going to a more broad specialty like internal medicine, and then like they become the permanent student. They do one fellowship and another fellowship, and another fellowship, and they're like, I think I want to do this, like a very niche interventional, EP cardiology thing. I'm sorry, my dog is crying in the background. Um, but it's it's financial commitment to be doing fellowships because you get paid a lot less than an attending.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that there's, one right answer. I think that everyone is sort of like at different stages in their lives and their careers. I think that there are different advantages depending on, where you are in life. So going immediately, I think that you can definitely gain like academic momentum. I encourage my sister to go immediately to grad school. I was just like, I think you should go because I know her personality, and I know that it would be better for her. And she also thanked me after that. So, it does allow you to finish sooner. And, it just depends on like sometimes like the obligations that you have. Maybe you have some family obligations or, things of that nature. I think that like, you do have less professional experience, as was mentioned. And sometimes that could be challenging in knowing what specifically would be a good fit for you. I think for me, I chose to gain like professional experience before pursuing any additional graduate degrees. And for me, like that was like incredibly valuable. When I entered graduate school, I wasn't really like learning, for example, like in isolation, like every theory for me connected to experiences that I already gained, like in classrooms and in schools. So that made my learning much, much richer. And I think that when we're thinking about like, I guess graduate school committees, for example, they evaluate applicants holistically, so grades matter, they're important, but so is experience and leadership and service, and evidence that you're committed to the profession. So I think that the question of how do you know that you're ready? I think that some of the questions that you can potentially ask yourself is like, do I guess for me too, like backwards planning was helpful. Do I know why I want this degree? Um, do I understand how it connects to my long-term goals? Am I prepared for the time and the commitment? And so I would just encourage students to engage with programs before applying, attend information sessions. I did that so many times. Meet admission staff, really develop relationships with them, speak with faculty, ask thoughtful questions, connect with current students. Just be not because you're trying to gain an advantage, but really because you're trying to determine whether the program is genuinely a right fit for you. Um, and so, that just helps you to also write a stronger statement of purpose. We know that that's part of the application process. You'll be able to then clearly articulate why that institution like aligns with your goals, and your experiences.
For me, there are a few pros and cons that I kind of uh, thought about when I was graduating my undergrad. The advantages of going right away for me was like that momentum, that cognitive and also like academic momentum, where like you're still learning, you have a structured schedule from classes, you also have a quicker turnaround for letters of recommendations for people that you are working with as an undergrad. There's also like what I did, like a natural end to a current appointment to transition to a new one, still having those relationships that could help you with that transition. There's also the advantage of like not having a gap in your education or in employment. Like say if you do not have the financial privilege to go to grad school with your own money or loans, like a stipend is really helpful for that transition as opposed to getting like a full-time job. But there are some disadvantages from going straight in. And for me, it was the requirement of multitasking during my undergraduate. Like I was still taking classes. I honestly could not have done classes and applied to schools and collecting letters of recommendations. So that's one factor that a lot of people should like think about, like the multitasking and the independent time management that is required to apply to grad school, because it's a cycle thing. Like it's a few months of prep, writing, editing, collecting letters, and also hitting all the deadlines that the school has for like sending transcripts and just like preparing for the whole process of interviewing. There's also this risk of like cognitive fatigue. You might be so drained and like worked to the core and like burnt out that you might not have a good transition into grad school. So I think there's a lot of advantages of gap years, and there is this time to gain letters of recs, to gain publications. Maybe you can join on to a project that is almost finishing up. In academia, getting published is a really big deal because it shows that people have invested in you, and also it shows that you can finish a project. So that's something that you'd only get with more time. And also, but the disadvantage that I can think of with taking gap years is just the unstructured time management. And maybe that's personal because my ADHD would not allow me to do that. But I did take a gap year. In that gap year, I was working on research and trying to get citations, like getting published. And you know what? I didn't get published in that year, but I got a title. And I asked the PI at that time, I was like, could I just say I will be published? And you know what? On my applications, I put the citation and it said in prep. And it ended up getting published, but it could have not gotten published. So for me, like prepping for grad school is just like putting a foot in the door and showing that you're not a rando. Like you have some people that can vouch for you, you have some experience. And something else that I will share is like during my grad applications, my mentor was super casual. He actually showed me the applications that were coming into that school that he was interviewing. And I was able to like assess, and I saw, oh my gosh, a lot of these people had pretty poorer GPA than I did, which is something that I was insecure about. And I was like, wow, and they're like getting through the interviewing stage. So that's something else I would recommend you is to talk to other people that have applied to the program. Talk to the people that are in the program. See if what you see on the website at admissions is what it is really in the end when someone commits. So yeah, learn from other people, and also just like try not to compare yourself. That's like the biggest thing with gap years. When you leave the school system, you're kind of fending for yourself, but just like maintain that confidence in yourself, because in the end, it's like your journey.
Yeah. We have about 20 to 30 more, or 10 to 20 more minutes before we jump into the live Q&A. So we're just going to speed through some of these last questions so everyone can get their thoughts out. But everyone made some really great points. And so a lot of questions that we did get coming through in the forums before the session were that people were having like a very large interest in a postgrad education, but they didn't know which degree to pursue because there are so many different options. I'd love to open up to the panel. Like, how did you all figure out which degrees to pursue, especially if someone has a lot of interest? And then also, one specific question we got was someone said, I have a career with lots of pivots already. I'm hoping the right grad program will help me narrow in on one path. Is this the right choice? Is this naive? How do you all think about that?
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
okay, I'm just gonna start so I can be quick. That was literally what I felt. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I just know I like neuroscience. So I actually applied to all the programs that my mentors and collaborators had collaborators at. So I was like, who do you know from this school? Who do you know from this school? I'm just gonna apply to those schools, and can you like let them know that I'm applying there? That's how I chose, honestly. I didn't really have like pure like question at all. And once you get into grad school, unless it's like a binding project, you can kind of change projects also. So for me, it's more so like you got to get in first and then you'll figure it out. But if you already figure it out, then you can find specific people that are studying that question.
Oh, go ahead.
That was a interesting point about the individual who has done a lot of things, thinking about going to graduate school and getting more focused. One of the, and this might sound a little crazy at first, but it's absolutely true. One of the things that graduate school provides to someone is the opportunity to pivot. You can make a change. Um, you can go, you might have been doing one thing for a long time. You go to graduate school and something else, and now you're qualified to go do that thing or do something else. Another thing that I would say is that in general, and different degrees, in my opinion, have different values. The relative value is very different across degrees. If you look at it, on a a real ROI type of basis in terms of money out and money in. I think that it graduate degrees provide optionality to the things that one might do post the graduate degree. And so different ones have more optionality. Those that are more technical and more, I, I was about to say more really hardcore STEM oriented might provide less opportunity, but that's probably not true. I'm just thinking about things like law school or an MBA or something like that. Those degrees do, I think, provide a lot of optionality because, I mean, lawyers don't only practice law. I mean, they go out and do different things. MBAs obviously do a lot of different things. So, I'm not trying to talk people out of STEM at all. I mean, STEM is incredibly valuable, and if you're really good, in any of the STEM areas, you're golden. You have a great career path in front of you. I'm just talking in terms of having optionality and preserving options going forward.
Yeah. Marina, you look like you might want to, or Charisse, say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that as I mentioned before, like I would just encourage folks to think about like who do you want to become professionally, in like 5 or 10 years. And I think that once you're clear about like the career path or the impact that you want to have, I think that for me, I always thought about like the impact that I wanted to have on my community, and and then I connected that to different careers. And then, once you're doing that, I think that it becomes a lot easier to identify which degree and which program will help you to get there. As I mentioned, like I knew that I wanted to become a school leader for a period of time, not for the rest of my life, but that made, my decision just a lot easier because I could identify like which programs and I knew which communities I wanted to serve. So that helped me to identify which programs would prepare me for that experience, that instructional leadership, organizational leadership, and then eventually the educational research. So, I would just encourage students to talk with people, as Amy said, talk with people, who perhaps already have the job that you want. Ask them what degree they earned, what they may have wished they had known, and whether they would, perhaps make the same decision again.
Yeah. Marina, was there something you wanted to say?
No, I think everybody covered it.
Great, great. Okay, and so moving on to the next question. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about, aspects of grad school, but when we think about it and specifically getting in, there were a couple questions that rolled in about that, specifically around exam and admission preparation and also structuring your personal statement and resume to demonstrate alignment with the goals and the values of the graduate program initiative. So, what is y'all's overall advice about getting into grad school and what the admissions process looks like? And also, I'll add to that, what are some common mistakes or misconceptions that might hurt admissions?
I can do this pretty quickly. So I honestly don't remember when the cycle is, like timeline wise, but for med school, you need to take an MCAT. You'll need like Amy was talking about specific letters that are relevant to STEM, that are maybe relevant to medicine if you shadowed somebody. You need your like good GPA, good science specific GPA, like outside activities, volunteering, kind of building a picture of a person who is committed to the healthcare field, right? Leadership opportunities, showing that you can work in a team. Medicine is a team sport, regardless of the specialty that you're doing. You will always work with in an interprofessional team. You will work with nurses, social workers, pharmacists, whatnot, and other specialties, of course. So you always need to show your people skills, right? You can learn the medicine afterwards. You don't need to know medicine to get into medical school. You need to be a reasonable human being. Um, the most common pitfall that we see is people writing their personal statements that they want to help people. And I know I said that myself actually, because the next question is then why not a nurse? Why not NP? Why not PA? Why not a pharmacist? Like all of those specialties are in healthcare and help people. So why specifically MD? I think my answer was like a lifetime of learning. I'm really into research personally. But I know everybody writes kind of their own story. A lot of people have like some maybe personal stories about like being involved in healthcare growing up. Maybe their mom was sick or they themselves were sick. So those are strong, of course, but like you don't need to fake a disease to get into medical school. Um, and then another good plan, like I kind of mentioned shadowing, but to have like a track of shadowing in the same specialty, maybe if you were like already committing to a specialty. And it would, the best plan, honestly, that I've seen like in my mentees, in my undergraduate mentees, is to start shadowing a person, like an MD in the school that you want to get into, right? Because they will know you personally there. And while that person might not work on the admissions, obviously they will, their name will speak tons to the admissions committee of the medical school.
I'm just going to add that it's really helpful to look at samples. So if you can connect on LinkedIn or anywhere with students from the program you're looking into, like most of them might be thrilled and happy to send you their applications. And then you should just definitely try not to compare yourself, but just keep in mind about that being a successful application and like take it with a grain of salt, but use it as a general sample of the scope as well as the tone and the like attitude that the student brought to their application.
I'm going to go back to something that I emphasized before, which is taking time to work between undergrad and graduate school or professional school, for a few reasons. One is, as I said, it's going to make you more interesting to an admissions committee, but it's also going to put you in a better position to write a personal statement or an essay or what have you, because you're going to know more. I guarantee you, you're going to know more 2 years after you graduate with a BA or a BS than you knew the day that you graduated. And you're going to be able to write about things that you've done or where you volunteered or whatever is applicable. Second, I think not having other academic-like things competing with the application process is helpful. Because depending upon the direction you're going, you're going to have to study for, an admissions test of some sort. And you're going to want to get a hold of as many different past exams or examples and do as many as you possibly can and understand them, why you got something right, why you got something wrong. It takes time. Your essay takes time. And then the third thing is, and Amy's brought this up several times in several contexts, and I'll reiterate it and maybe summarize it just as sort of a general statement. Um, Take that time, those 2 years or 3 years or whatever it turns out to be, to, I would call it networking. Never, ever, ever pass up the opportunity to meet someone and learn about what they do, why they do it, how they got there, who they are, what motivates them. It might not, pay off immediately. It might not pay off next year or 5 years or whatever, but it almost certainly will pay off at some point down the road. And it's one of the most valuable things a human being can do, I think, throughout life, quite honestly, professional life and personal life.
Yeah, and I would just also add like your grades matter. Like we know that's important because it definitely does demonstrate that you can handle graduate level work. Admissions committees do want to understand why does this degree make sense for you? Like in my experience, like the strongest applicants are able to connect like their personal volunteer experience to what they hope to accomplish through grad school. And so, as Ted mentioned, like before I pursued teaching, I had already been working with students. Before pursuing educational leadership, I had leadership experience. So my application showed a consistent commitment to education. And so admissions committees, like, they're not just asking, is this person qualified? They're also asking, like, is this program the right fit for this person? And is this person the right fit for us? I think that a misconception is that you need a perfect GPA. While GPA is important, and test scores are important, I was and still am probably a horrible test taker. I mean, whew, I just did not do well. I wasn't a great test taker at all. As I mentioned earlier, I was a neurodivergent learner. I was tested in separate locations when I was in school. And I just process information a lot differently than others. And so, I think that academic performance is important. However, admissions committees, they're looking at you holistically. And so, you shouldn't necessarily try to present yourself as a perfect applicant, but just they're thinking about like authenticity. I think that's, a lot more compelling. So your experiences, your service, your resilience, your commitment, to a particular profession, matters as well.
Yeah, and so moving on to the next question, one of the biggest like hindrances to going to grad school is obviously the funding. It's not free. Well, sometimes it is if you get scholarships, but um, I want to open the question up to, these panelists. So how can students fund graduate and professional school, and what are the options across different programs? I know we had some notes in the chat about FAFSA and if that applies and is still available, but I would love to know all about the options for funding. And then Kelly, I think we'll skip the last question and go into a Q&A, and it'll probably be we through.
I kind of touched up on that there has been a lot of recent changes to medical education funding specifically. There has been a limit set, I believe. And I honestly am not very much up to date to this because it just keeps changing. Nobody really knows what's going on. Like I mentioned, there is a threat to stop the PSLF program, the public student loan forgiveness. FAFSA does apply. We do qualify for the federal funding, but I think there's a limit now, which is tough because some medical schools are significantly more expensive or are in cities that are significantly more expensive. So the living costs, is what is the main issue sometimes.
I think that there are a lot more, I think, opportunities or options than many people may realize. I think that, as Marina mentioned, there are employer tuition assistance programs, public service loan forgiveness. I was able to benefit from that program. There are scholarships, fellowships, of course, assistantships, um, tuition reimbursement. And, we've been talking a lot about like, having like a certain level of professional experience, and how that's beneficial prior to entering grad school. I think that that's also beneficial, if you're connected with an employer that has employee tuition assistance. I think that that's also great. So you can work and you can attend grad school as well and have your employer pay for grad school. So it's great to find programs like that too. There are a lot of them out there like that. Personally, I did finance a lot of my graduate education through student loans. But like looking back, like I would encourage students to just research scholarships, like research scholarships and employer tuition benefits early, because many, opportunities are available if you plan ahead.
Yeah, funding situations also change so rapidly. So as much as you can prepare, it's almost like a part of the training as a grad student is to adapt and look for funding. My program guaranteed the first 2 years of funding, and then the rest was going to be covered by my mentor. But my mentor actually lost funding during like administrative stuff. So I actually ended up working on a project for one of her collaborators who had money. So that's like one example of like adapting to whatever's available to you. And I ended up working at two labs, and I guess like I kind of that opened up the doors of having like two mentors. But the last quarter, when I was preparing for my defense and my dissertation, it became very demanding. It became so demanding that I was like, I feel like this is not worth it. Like I am working two jobs now. So I actually at the last quarter when I was writing my defense, I declined the offer for that stipend, and I actually took out a loan for the first time since undergrad. So I felt like that loan was like worth it for me to just write my defense or write my dissertation. But this is just an example of how like finances always change. But being able to adapt is already one big part of the experience of getting graduate education. And I'm sure and confident that you all would be able to navigate it.
So I think maybe Kelly, we can move on to the live Q&A. So
Yeah. Oh, do you want to go ahead, Julian, and
yeah,
introduce it?
well, yeah, this live Q&A. If anyone wants to maybe come off mute or drop it in the chat, we can make sure those questions are answered live. And if any questions don't really roll in, and you guys need a little bit more time, we do have one more question geared up that we can ask around work-life balance. Okay. Um, all right, we have a question in the chat. I'm glad that the panel brought up the pivot during graduate school. First question. I have a Master of Science in Food Safety and Technology and undergrad in agriculture. I did my master's thesis with the FDA on chemistry and packaging and working on publishing the research. I'm preparing for the GRE too, and I'm interested in going to PhD in food science or nutrition. If those schools have both PhDs, and will they allow us to apply for both the programs? In another case, nutrition PhD comes under med school, which requires prerequisites in nutrition, which I lack. How do I handle this situation? My focus for PhD is food chemistry, flavor and sensory science, food science, and eating behavior, metabolism, and obesity nutrition.
Maybe Amy or Marina might have some insights into that. I know there are, in general, sometimes there are based on the school limitations on how many PhD programs at the school you can apply to. It may only be one, but that's a school by school consideration to bring up with their graduate division. But Amy or Marina, do you have more insights specifically into navigating these STEM and med school related questions?
So I think I hear your dilemma. I've been in a similar dilemma to this because you don't really like your interests are so broad and you can kind of take it the metabolic route or the food chemistry route. If your question is what program to go for and to apply to both, honestly, you should apply to whatever your capacity is. Because for me, it's more so like you want to get as many opportunities for yourself as you can, but not at the risk of actually like kind of overloading yourself. So if it was me, I would kind of decide on another metric that's important to you, maybe the location, maybe the funding. if you're stuck in a dilemma in terms of the specialty, then maybe try to make that decision on another metric that is important to you. That's my advice. And that I'm sure there's a lot of metrics that we each use to or think about when we make decisions. But some that I would provide is maybe thinking about the location, also like um, what advisors are available. There is a few years where like in neuroscience, people were only studying rats, and then a few years only people that were using human imaging were taking students. So that's something that you consider, like who's look into like who's actually looking for students in the cycle that you're applying for, and maybe that will make the decision for you. Maybe like food science, not many people recruiting, other people are recruiting. So yeah, my general advice is when you're in a dilemma, see if you can figure it out based on other things that are important to you.
Well, and I would also add that I, I'm not just based on that tiny bit of information convinced that covering both the metabolic and the chemistry routes are necessary for the goal here. It might be a little too overly inclusive to get to where you want to be. But if you think that, those are really both important to you, perhaps there's a way to finesse it in terms of figure out which one is most important to you, pursue that first, and then you can do some sort of perhaps not a PhD in the other one, but maybe a master's degree or some other type of study that will qualify you in that area to supplement the area that you earned the PhD in.
Yeah, I'm also reading through it again. I'm wondering, uh, in some ways, you can have an advantage where you have such a specialty that if there's a program that's such an amazing fit, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for someone exactly like you, and it could be too when you mentioned medical school that there are MD, PhD programs, the joint programs offered in this. I haven't been aware of any that have the overlap with more of like the food science side of things, but that doesn't mean there aren't out there, or there isn't a case to be made for, why you're the person to bring these fields together in that way.
Yeah, exactly what Kelly did was reframing a gap in the literature that you have found. And maybe that could be what you talk about in your essay. Like, you guys specialize in this, and I'm interested in bringing this. That's exactly what I think admissions would be really particularly interested in.
Nice. I think Jasmine has her hand raised.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So sorry that I cannot turn on my camera today. Hopefully next meeting I can. But first thing I want to say, thank you all for the panelists for joining. I really enjoyed hearing everyone's perspective and story. But my question today is just a general question. Just looking back, what's one thing you wish you had known before starting grad school that would have changed your experience while in school or after school? I know it's a broad question.
It's a great question, actually,
Mhm.
and I really love it, but kind of related to the whole idea of going to grad school right after undergrad. That's what I did, and um, it took me some time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I mentioned
Mhm.
that I actually ended up doing surgery at first, and then I realized that I'm actually interested in a slightly different approach to my patients. Like my whole idea was to make my patients feel more comfortable in their bodies and fit in society better. So I wanted to do plastics, and then I realized I just don't like the culture that I was seeing there. So I switched to psychiatry.
Mhm.
My main, goal in life is still the same, but I'm glad that I took the path that I did. Like I did a lot of, learning and made my application to fellowships quite unique and stuff. But also ended up not wasting, but like spending 2 extra years getting where I need to be, right? So
Yeah.
I think that I wish I knew it was like knowing myself a little bit better for sure.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I think that when I think about grad school, especially for my doctorate degree, I think about this often. I just graduated with my doctorate degree last year in 2025. And I was in my program for many years, a little bit longer than I wanted to be.
Mhm.
And I think that the reason for that was, well, part of the reason I would say is I think it's important to know the right fit for an advisor and for your
Mhm.
committee members. Really, advisors, choosing the right advisor or dissertation committee chair is going to be extremely valuable for you, and sometimes will determine how quickly you finish or how much
Mhm.
longer you stay in a program. And so I think oftentimes we think about the work that we're doing and how that aligns to an advisor's work, and that's important, but sometimes personality is important as well, and whether the person is a good fit for you and how you work as a scholar, and how they work as a scholar, and so we all, as scholars work in our own ways, in our own right, and so that can be different. And so I think it's important to think about, um, because your advisor and your committee, they're going to be reading your dissertation. They are going to be giving you advice on next steps. They are going to be revising and doing all of the things, right? So
Mhm.
you need to have a good committee that is aligned. And it's important to speak with people who have been in the program before you have or before you apply, and ask them questions. I think that those, and I'm always willing to help those who are coming after me. Like they're asking me questions about, is this person a good person? It's just like, it depends on your personality. Is that a good fit for you? So I would think about that as well.
Thank you.
It is very easy to go into grad school and have this like eager people pleasing tendency as an academic. But once you kind of lose sight of like your own goals, the goals will be chosen for you. So just stay intentional and stay grounded with your own goals. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I saw that there's a question in the chat, would you recommend cold emailing advisors for labs you're interested in? I think Amy, you were cold messaging people on LinkedIn. But what about for advisors in labs that you're interested in? Would you say yes?
Yeah, I think as a potential applicant, you should be applying the foresight of recruitment. In the emails, don't sound like an undergrad that's looking for a spot in a research lab. You have to say like I'm about to apply to this program. Curious if you're recruiting or curious if you have any collaborators recruiting because I think your research aligns with my interests. So make it kind of like a LinkedIn email rather than a cold email, if that makes sense. Be a little bit more personable, and I would recommend that you let them into your process and let them know where you're at and where you might be interested in going. Because at that point, they don't really know who you are, but they might know where to point you towards. And also, if they're like someone that's recruiting right now, they're going to reply and they're going to kind of like figure out if you're a good fit. Because a lot of grad school is based on like recommendations and a lot of like people management. So word goes around. If they have someone that's recruited, they might like pass your email along. So my advice is just to treat it like LinkedIn almost.
Well, I would I think that's good advice, and I'll get back to it in a second. But this kind of goes along with the networking thing. Never be afraid to approach somebody that might be able to help you. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to ignore you, or they're going to say no, and you move on to the next person. It doesn't matter.
I actually end most of my emails with questions to make sure they
Yeah, yeah, to make sure they get back.
ask them a
And
question they can't not like answer.
I think what Amy's bringing up is just like, networking, I think is one of the most important things you can do. The second is, I would call it marketing. Learn how to market your ideas, your questions, be able to express yourself and communicate. And what I mean by that is basic, marketing is human beings relating to human beings. Everything in life is marketing. Whether you're applying for a job, you're asking somebody for a date, you're asking somebody to marry you, it's all marketing. So, get good at that. And ways to get good at that are practice and see what other people are doing and get out there and do it. As I say, what's the worst that's going to happen? But describing it like a LinkedIn email, I guess it's a good way to describe it.
And if I can add just a little caveat, because one thing I'm seeing on the ground is some departments, because funding is getting a little tighter or people are shuffling funding around, especially in STEM departments where you would traditionally reach out to potential PIs, the principal investigators and lab leaders. Look to see if they're telling people to hold off on emailing. I heard recently some Cornell department has done that. I think they maybe are just trying to make sure faculty aren't leading students on, maybe, if they're not yet sure where the funding will land. But it could also be that some students are automating emails to faculty and it's getting to be too much. I've heard that too, where some are getting hundreds of emails. And so please be, deliberate, intentional, customize what you're asking. Don't be afraid to send a follow-up. It's easy to fall through the cracks, and don't take it personally if they don't get back to you right away. But be careful also not to be incessant or to have those kind of form emails, because also, like Amy mentioned, word gets around if it seems like you're being a little too proactive there.
Well, I think that's part of marketing. That's good judgment. You're a nitwit if you send out,
Don't spam them.
a
Yeah.
thousand, a thousand, form emails to, people in the things you're interested in at the 10 schools you're interested in. Don't do that. Each has to be crafted individually and, appeal to the person's interests, research, ego, sense of themselves, whatever. And, don't be afraid to do that. But, don't have, Claude or Perplexity or whatever generate one letter for you that you send to 1,000 people.
I'll give you one more tip. You can actually catch them in the action because many professors have public lectures that if you could, you can meet them there. Like you can actually see if there's any like lectures or talks that they are giving. That's like the best way to meet someone like in person.
Yeah. Kelly, I know we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe we can put on the screen where everyone can stay tapped into us and the ecosystem and then stay on a little bit longer. Because to me, I know that you have a question and there's a question in the chat about, getting a JD, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that this isn't the last time that you have to get, resources from the Postgrad Playbook or another degree. You can pull out your phones and scan these QR codes to stay connected and with the Postgrad Playbook, share our guides. And then Kelly, you can share a little bit more about what another degree does.
Yeah, another degree, we do offer direct mentoring services. That can be especially valuable if you don't have access through a current university or you're not quite getting the kind of mentorship that you need in either applying to graduate school, fleshing out a research uh, case or project, or thinking about how you want to use grad school to get into the career that you're interested in. But also, if you are at an institution right now, look into resources that you have available there as well. And if anyone wants to mention any other resources that you recommend for students who are navigating graduate school, I know it's such a kind of a opaque universe to enter. And it's something that, as a first generation college student, it took a lot of navigating hidden curriculum for me, but that's partly why I like to offer another degree.
I think we can potentially just move on to the next few questions while we wrap up.
Kelly, before we move on, I just wanted to jump in and point this out aloud, although I've seen it in the chat a little bit. All of the panelists, as far as I know, are another degree mentors, correct? So, that if you have enjoyed this panel and are interested in it, certainly go to anotherdegree.com and you can look us up as well as a number of other folks and consider whether or not you would like to talk with any of us.
Yep. Yeah, and I will be in touch with everyone to follow. And Jolene posted her discount code if anyone is interested in that. And also, if you're from institutions, would love to, embed and offer some of our programs through various institutions. So if we have a brief minute, any final few words of advice from our panelists to our audience today?
I would say move with intention, more importantly than anything. Don't apply to programs just because you feel pressured by society or your family or your friends to just let's go get a degree, Know why it's useful for you long term.
I completely agree with what Marina said. I I think that's so valuable to just know what it is that you want to do, what impact you want to make. And I think so often we focus a lot on the degrees and the credentials, and those are important, yes, but think about like the impact that you want to make on, society and your community. Um, I would also add that it's important to network when we're thinking about grad school and applying to grad school and getting accepted to the grad school that we want to go to. Network, 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 and just be confident. Be confident.
And again, I'll be a little bit of a broken record and reiterate what other people have said also. Don't be afraid of taking some time to figure things out, but use that time productively. Get a job, volunteer and get a job, whatever you can do, whatever will make you a better informed person and a better candidate and allow you to sock away a little bit of money. Um, uh, Again, networking is the most valuable thing I think you can do. And part of what networking does is it gives you experience in learning how to market yourself, market ideas, talk to people, because that's what you're doing. You're talking to people, you're persuading people, you're selling your skills, your background, your interests. It's very important. So with those things, I'll close.
My only advice is to keep doing what you're doing. You showed up today, so you're doing great. You're learning, and you'll make the best decisions for you. And also, you already did it once. Like everyone had high school education. You know what? Education is all the same. It's just like looking for more information to feed your brain and find your purpose in the society. So you're already doing it. So just keep doing it, is my advice.
Great. And thank you to our audience today and all your amazing questions. And thank you to our panelists for sharing your time and your wisdom. And Jolene for sharing all of your services and guidance through the Postgrad Playbook. Anything else you want to add, Jolene?
No, well, thank you all. It's been such a great panel. I feel like I learned so much about grad school as well and graduate programs that I didn't know before. But yeah, excited to stay in touch and also like everybody, if you you definitely book a session with these mentors. I can only imagine what a one-on-one would do. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, subscribe to the Postgrad Playbook. The link's in the chat.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Great rest of your week.
You too.